Tom Dean's work reminds me of something that Winston Churchill once said. It's a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. Today I'll do a quick overview with a special focus on Tom's published writings and interviews. In the 1970s, the period covered in the exhibition at the McLaughlin Art Gallery, Tom was working in performance but also outdoor interventions. His work Goodbye from 1970, which consists of blue and gold sequins on canvas, is pictured here hanging from Tom's studio on Saint Laurent Boulevard in Montreal. At this time, Tom was also writing articles in countercultural magazines and doing self-published pamphlets, some of which are reprinted for this exhibition. As well, Tom also published 3 issues of the arts magazine Beaux-Arts from 1972 to 1974. So I hope this gives you a sense of Tom's precocious work from the 1970s. In 1978, Tom embarked on a massive project, The Floating Staircase. This was begun in 1978 and completed in 1979. Then, for 2 years after, it lived in Lake Ontario, sometimes leading a calm existence and sometimes a stormy existence. This is Tom describing this work. The floating staircase was a device of the imagination, so awkward, 5 tons, 24 square feet, floating on 56 oil barrels. A device of the imagination so awkward that it could not be appropriated by any aspect of our culture. What was explicit in the staircase is perhaps implicit in much of modern art. Its uselessness and essential homelessness. Tom once described this work as a kind of personal nemesis. The thing's awkwardness and unyielding scale were always present, he said. I knew that I was creating a nemesis, and from the very beginning looked forward to burning it. This personal nemesis, what at other times he's called a white elephant or an albatross, this nemesis had multiple personalities. This is Tom describing the work again. When we finally finished it, of course, it just sat there, bobbing in the water, innocent and proudly opaque. I would bring people down to see it on little private tours, and often we would have picnics or soirees by the stairs down in the industrial harbor front. There was always media coverage of the "isn't he a crazy guy" variety. So although very few people saw it, it was well known. Photographers photographed it. Its image was used in fashion ads. I used its image in various articles and projects. In a wind or storm, its personality changed dramatically, and it became wild and uncontrollable. The 24 square vertical surface on its back made trying to hold it in the wind like trying to hold a ship at full sail. We built an immense anchor for it and rigged it with 1/4-inch steel cables and 2.5-inch nylon ropes. Despite this, late one night it escaped its moorings in a storm and took off across the slip, an immense dark shadow looming out of the darkness, buckling and heaving and striking terror. There was never any rest. One had to figure out how to get it out of the water, where to store it in the winter, and how to get it back in. How to move it from one mooring across the harbor to another. There was always some shipping deadline or other that meant it had to be moved to a new place, and there was constant maintenance, boards torn off in the storms, vandalism to be repaired. As you can see, these physical demands required a lot of willpower from the artist, which connected this work to a Christian tradition, as well as to more sinister aspects of our culture. Here's Tom again. I don't think I have a lot of willpower. So I was very aware of this thing as an exercise of the will, as a kind of spiritual exercise by which to redeem the fallen world, make it upright again. Labor as prayer was St. Augustine's way of seeing it, and it's at the bottom of what we call the Protestant work ethic. But, he continues, I kept recalling that other phrase, the triumph of the will, the title of the famous Nazi propaganda film. There was another side to this upright business that seemed a little suspect. In investigating the phrase, I've found that Speer's first project for Hitler was to, quote, a mighty flight of stairs, topped and enclosed by a long colonnade, flanked on both ends by stone abutments. And so, in the fall of 1981, after 3 years of adventures, the floating staircase was burned to ashes on the water. And in 1983, Tom exhibited the ruins of the staircase at Mercer Union. As he was wrestling with his nemesis, this huge project floating on Lake Ontario, Tom published an interview in File magazine. It was titled The Upright Dot, an illustrated interview by Shannon Griffiths that was published in File Volume 4, Number 3 of 1980, in which he talks about the floating staircase in relation to a smaller, less grandiose project that Tom conducted in the streets of Toronto. A series of right-angle shapes stenciled on construction hoarding. Shannon asked, last summer you constructed a floating staircase in the harbor. Now you're painting angles on fences. What's the connection? To which Tom responded, the angles are a staircase that's fallen apart. The staircase is the erection, earthly, material, heroic. The angle patterns are randomized erections, entropic architecture, the erection in outer space. I think, he continued, if you look closely enough, you'll find that reality is made up of billions and billions of tiny little randomized swastikas. Disorderly, fractured, fragmented, schizophrenic. Here you see Tom returns to the fascist connotations of the floating staircase, this nemesis that is also a triumph of the will. But in the graffiti piece, the monumentality of the staircase has pulverized. It has become granular, dispersed, like a virus, or perhaps dispersed as an atmosphere in the environment. To my mind, this piece from 1980 has renewed significance in today's moment of populist backlash and censorship in support of genocide. This is Tom again describing the angle paintings. The fence paintings are liberalized swastikas, stylized entropy, cultured entropy. Swastikas so liberalized, they have no convictions. Swastikas under zero gravity. The perpendicular without its upright nature, somewhere between fascism and liberal non-commitment, liberal irony. I've long admired the way in which Tom uses print media as a way to extend the poetic dimension of his art projects. And I hope that these excerpts from the interview convey a sense of what I mean by this poetic dimension. But all of what I've been talking about so far has happened before my time, so to speak. These projects took place before I was even aware of contemporary art. I only began going to galleries in the late 1980s, by which time the floating staircase, like General Ideas Pavilion, had already burned to the ground. By this time, Tom's work was circulating a great deal across Canada, with his ambitious gallery piece titled Excerpts from a Description of the Universe. This work was premiered in 1985 at the massive Aurora Borealis exhibition in Montreal. It was also exhibited at the 49th Parallel Gallery in New York City. And just as an aside, can you believe that the Canada Council used to run a gallery for Canadian artists right in the epicenter of the New York art world? In the same building on West Broadway, where the galleries of Leo Castelli, Sonna Bend, John Weber, Andre Emmerich, and Mary Boone were located. This is unbelievable to me today in 2025. So these are the types of places where Tom began exhibiting his series of tables populated by quirky metaphysical sculptures. Further excerpts in this series were shown in 1986 at Art Culture Resource Center in Toronto and also a René Bloyen Gallery in Montreal. This unfolding work seemed to be an extended thesis on ontological matters. How can we tell that something is a thing and that something else is simply the part of another thing? Check out the colored dots in this tiny dress. Dots that remind me of the packaging of Wonder Bread, which leads me to ask, is the capacity for wonder something sublime or something banal like a Wonder Bread? In the late 1980s, some of Tom's tiny sculptures like these started migrating to the art gallery, like this sculpture titled Girl from 1989. A work that became iconic in its time. I remember seeing it reproduced in several magazines and exhibition catalogs. In 1992 and 93, there was a major touring exhibition of excerpts from a description of the universe that was organized by the Art Gallery of York University. It traveled to the Southern Alberta Art Gallery in Lethbridge, the Fine Arts Gallery at UBC, the Dunlop Art Gallery in Regina, and the Nickel Art Museum in Calgary. This is also the moment when Tom started participating with artists closer to my own generation. Here's an installation piece titled It Comes from the Heart, made in 1990, which Tom exhibited with an artist collective called Nethermind. And Nethermind was one of the artist collectives of the time that was known for its ambitious and kind of dark installation projects located in massive deindustrialized buildings across Toronto. The 1990s were a time of an explosion of artist collectives here in Toronto. It was during a long economic recession and attacks on public funding for the arts, as well as other social programs. Oddly, it was also a time of high energy on the part of young artists, despite all of these cutbacks and economic precarity. The artist collectives were, to my mind, the art world correlative of the rave scene that was happening simultaneously in the music world. Large-scale events taking place in massive empty warehouses beyond the regular venues of performance and display. I remember seeing this massive painting, Brutal, made in 1992 in collaboration with Gordon Anderson. The word brutal covered in glitter, like the goodbye painting that hung from Tom's studio in Montreal 22 years previously. At the end of the millennium, in 1999, Tom exhibited his work in the Canadian Pavilion at the Venice Biennial. He titled his exhibition The Whole Catastrophe, and the exhibition catalog included 3 artist books that recall his self-published pamphlets from the 1970s. The exhibition included a piece titled Monday, March 8, 1999, My Broken Heart. The piece consisted of a special edition of that day's newspaper, printed at the Globe and Mail's presses and entirely covered in Tom's dots, which had previously covered the floating staircase in the 1990s, as well as the large-scale format canvases from the 1970s that we can now see at the McLaughlin in Oshawa. My partner Chris and I live with Tom's penis turds from The Whole Catastrophe. Of course, in this brief overview, I have not attempted to represent everything that Tom has made, and I have not even mentioned the wonderfully perverse bronze sculptures that he has produced starting in the 2000s. But I hope this quick overview of Tom's work over the years provides some orientation to his work, especially highlighting his consistent use of print media to disseminate his ideas large and small, his riddles wrapped in mysteries inside an enigma. Thank you.